Welcome, folks. It's the It's Official podcast, post Breeders' Cup edition. Jeremy Plonk here from First Bet and Express Bet, joined by my partner, Jeff Siegel. He's seen all the Breeders' Cups over the years, and we're going to talk about what we saw in Breeders' Cup 41 this weekend at Del Mar. Also talk about Jeff's experience as the morning line maker. Pat on the back, did an excellent job. The Saturday Breeders' Cup races almost played identically to the line, so good work there from Mr. Siegel. And I want to start off the top of the show, Jeff. There was a lot of discussion after the Breeders' Cup Classic, people throwing their hands up in the air. City of Troy should have never been in the Classic. Next should have never been in the Classic. How terrible was it to put these horses in these races? Did you see the Melbourne Cup last night? Might I say, in the Melbourne Cup, Knight's Choice paid a square, $221 to win. If you ain't in these races, you can't win them. There's no rich strike. There's no mind that bird. You got to take a chance every once in a while if you want to be great. And look, City of Troy, no fire at all. Next, even less fire in the Classic. But I'm glad they were in it. And as the Melbourne Cup showed last night, Jeff, you got to be in it to win it.
You got to be in it to win it, and they were in it and they didn't win it. I tell you what. I think the track was a little deeper than normal, and I think maybe City Troy had a little bit tough time grabbing it a little bit. He got dirt in his face, which you always, you have to figure that that's a negative thing when you've never had it before. But they took care of him. It was his last start. He really hadn't anything to lose by trying, and so he didn't run. Next, on the other hand, although I thought he had a chance, but I also thought there was just as good a chance he'd run last as he did if he would have been right there. Right. I would have liked to have seen him run in the grass. I don't know whether he would have beaten Rebels Romance in that race or not. But the good news, I hope it's good news that next we'll see him again next year and enjoy him. City of Troy is off to stud, which we knew was going to happen. And you had some very good racing for sure, but there are a lot of no-shows, and we'll talk about that as well. That, to me, may have been the most disappointing aspect of the entire two-day festival, is that there were several horses that I really wanted them to run well, and they didn't. And that's a letdown. But, that happens in horse racing. There's no guarantees. You got to go out and do it, and sometimes you do it and you look brilliant doing it, and sometimes you just don't show up.
From a gambling standpoint, there was a good mix of intermediate prices throughout the Breeders' Cup. A lot of those $12, $13, $14 horses that you can make a little bit of hay with. You just had to come up with them in races where there were 5, 6, 7 multiple contenders in each race. Not a great gambling weekend for me. If you watched our preview podcast, we were hot in some spots, very cold in others. So it was a negative for me overall in playing this year's Breeders' Cup. But we're going to review the 5 hot topics as we do each and every week here on It's Official, but in a little different style, because those of you in the U.S. know it's election day. Get out there and vote today. Jeff Siegel and I are going to go to the ballot box for 5 topics this week, and we're going to cast our votes for a couple major categories, a couple disappointments, and maybe some horses to look forward to for the future. So we're going to start things out. We're going to the ballot box. First up, the MVP of the Breeders' Cup. Who was the most valuable performance that we saw Breeders' Cup weekend? Jeff, step into the booth. Who do you got?
Well, Lake Victoria got my vote, although you like Sierra Leone, and I could not disagree with that one either. I could have did them both. But I know it's not the most prestigious or popular division. 2-year-old fillies running long on the grass. But over the years, we've seen some really, really great performances in this division. And I think Lake Victoria's win, not only the way she did it, but extending her career record to a perfect 5 for 5 for Aidan O'Brien, the daughter of Frankel. She was supposed to come over here and dominate. Lots of these Euros don't do that, but she did. And considering the future, we'll see her next year and hopefully the year after that. And I expect to see her, as the favorite in the 1,000 guineas next year and then into the classics there for Aidan O'Brien. I thought she was absolutely brilliant the way she performed. And so she gets my MVP vote, but your vote for Sierra Leone is certainly justified as well. I think these 2 performances stood out among the 2-day event.
Let's go back to Future Stars Friday, where it was Lake Victoria in the juvenile fillies turf. She was sizzling late.
On process, the leader. Kilwin continues to bear down. Lake Victoria's got her room now. And here she comes as she swings up on the outside. And they're into the stretch. Thought process bracing for the challenge of Lake Victoria. And Lake Victoria goes right by to take the lead. Fiery Lucy is coming late with Mayday ready, but she's just too good. Lake Victoria, undefeated, has won the Breeders' Cup. It was Lake Victoria over Mayday ready.
Not quite a Rozzy runs right by him from Tom Durkin back in 91 at Churchill Downs, but she was really impressive. One of the best 4 and 2-year-olds we've seen in the Breeders' Cup, maybe since a Rozzy in 1991. Maybe we'll see her back in the U.S. next year in the Filly and Mare Turf, but the English Classic certainly will be the early spring and summer dates circled for Queen Victoria. Just a phenomenal performance. To me, she stole the day on Future Stars Friday. As for my MVP, we're going with Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone gets the check in the ballot box from me here. This was a race that Sierra Leone kind of needed, Jeff. I mean, when you think about it, this is a horse who cost $2.3 million. He was supposed to be great, but he had lost 4 in a row, 3 as the favorite. His earnings to date, $2.3 million. He was a break-even operation going into the Breeders' Cup Classic. He had the chance of basically being 2 for 7 on the year if he didn't get a victory on Saturday in the Breeders' Cup Classic. It was all on the line for Sierra Leone's reputation, for his legacy. Is he one of the top horses in the country, or is he just a 3-year-old who completely continued to underperform? Again, beaten favorite 3 races in a row, 2 of those at the hands of Fierceness. He had to get it done on Saturday, and he delivered. It was a little bit different performance for him because he kept straight in the lane and he did everything the right way. Let's take a look at Sierra Leone running down Fierceness in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Then I want to get your thoughts on his victory.
Around the far turn, Fierceness. Fierceness has taken over the lead. Newgate on the attack. Sierra Leone is revving up on the far outside with a burst toward the front runners as they come to the top of the stretch. And they're into the stretch. And Sierra Leone has circled up on the outside to take the lead. Fierceness battles on second. Newgate behind them. Forever Young on the far outside. Sierra Leone. Fierceness digs in. Newgate. Forever Young. Sierra Leone close to home. Sierra Leone does it in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Fierceness was second. Forever Young was third. Newgate fourth. And then came Senor Busca.
Heady ride there by Flavian Pratt. They swooped up early. 3 left-handed sticks coming in through the middle of the stretch. We know his tendency to bear into the left. He did give him the one right-handed tap at the wire there to just finish off the last few jumps, but I thought it was significant. I talked with the guys at Wiesen on Saturday. We were doing a live show with Wiesen during the Breeders' Cup races, and they wanted to know what I thought about Sierra Leone, and I said, you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's a short stretch there at Del Mar, less than 900 feet. But the fact that he bears in a long stretch, just kind of when he's on that lead the whole way, a short stretch might actually serve him pretty well if he can get to the front in time. And that's exactly how it played out in there. It was an A-plus performance for me for Sierra Leone. Yes, he got a nice pace setup, but he's had some nice pace setups before and didn't deliver like that. So for me, he was the MVP. He got the big prize in the $7 million Classic. Your take on his race?
He ran great. And he, as you pointed out, he didn't do anything wrong or stupid. This was like a seasoned pro, like all the other disappointing runs that he had when he was leaning on and all this other stuff. That didn't happen at all. Now, again, perfect trip, perfect ride, good, perfect pace scenario. Everything went his way. And he rose to the occasion, whereas there have been other times when he hasn't, you know. So good for him. He's only had now the 9 starts, and this was his best. His Bayard numbers have gone from 99 to 102 to 109 to 111 for this race. He's got a chance to be a very important horse next year and make a lot of money if they want to travel with him. So he was outstanding. And my question to you is, and I've heard some discussion about this, that it's cut and dried, that he's now the champion 3-year-old. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, obviously the Breeders' Cup Classic should carry the most weight as a championship race, and he won it. But you wouldn't have said that going into the race, and it wasn't like Fierceness ran bad. So what's your take on that? Does this clinch 3-year-old championship for him?
There are 4 races on the resume where he ran against Fierceness. He outran him in the Kentucky Derby by a long ways, and he outran him in the Breeders' Cup Classic by a shorter ways. Those are the two biggest races in America, the Kentucky Derby and the Breeders' Cup. When they needed to be their best, he was better than Fierceness twice. So even though Fierceness beat him in the couple Saratoga races, the Jim Dandy and, and the Travers Stakes, give me that Kentucky Derby Breeders' Cup double over those two Saratoga races in terms of importance. Yeah, I think Sierra Leone's your champion 3-year-old, and he'll be on the ballot for Horse of the Year. I think Fierceness will be on the ballot for Horse of the Year, and we'll talk about the filly Torpedo Anna, who certainly will be on the ballot for Horse of the Year. But to me, the voting would come down to those three. And as for champion 3-year-old, though, yeah, I think you put it in Sierra Leone's camp at this point. He had a good season through the races, the Bluegrass, a grade 1. So this isn't like his first and only grade 1 as well. I give him the championship. I think it's Sierra Leone, and a lot was on the line for Fierceness in that race as well.
Well, I agree with you. I only because I'm a kind of a traditionalist, and I think the big races produce champions. I'm not that interested in, although the races that Fierceness did beat Sierra Leone were good races for sure, but and important races, and were kind of like they could serve as tiebreakers, but when you win he didn't win the Derby, but he ran better than Fierceness when it was supposed to be the championship. And certainly this is where you're supposed to rise to the occasion. He did. But my respect for Fierceness certainly hasn't wavered. I used to think of him as an inconsistent up and down. Everything that goes his way, will run great. Otherwise it won't. But he's gained my respect. Let's put it that way.
Well, he got your respect so much that you went to the ballot box and said he had the toughest beat of any horse in this year's Breeders' Cup. For Fierceness, was it because of the pace, Jeff? They went fast in there. He attended a good deal of the pace. He led turning for home, and then he was able, that he was run down. But do you call it a tough beat for him in the sense that he was up and attending that pace and didn't cave and ran his race? Or is there another reason why you think this was the toughest beat?
Well, it's actually something you said, and I hadn't thought about it until you said it last week on our show. And then I said, I think he's got a point there. Fierceness really isn't a 1.25 mile horse. Now, I tip my hat to him because he ran well. He beat everybody else. He was part of that hot pace. All the other pace horses kind of waved the white flag. He went in. Right. If it had been a less pressure, I think he probably would have been able to stuck it out. Now, going into the heat of a fast pace when you're not versatile enough to take back, I mean, that's your fault, really, when you think about it. Right. That happens. That's part of the game. You can't just say, oh, I was on a fast pace, therefore I was best. And I've heard that from some handicappers. Every time they get cooked on a fast pace, they say, oh, he was best. Well, not really, because that's part of the pace. And if he could have taken back and if he was versatile enough to do that, it wouldn't have been. So I don't give him too much of an excuse to that. But I thought it was a tough pace, a tough beat, because he did take the heat. It took a true 1.25 mile colt, very good colt with a perfect trip and perfect ride to beat him at a distance that he might not be at his best. I mean, it's no shame that you don't really want to go 1.25 miles. He's a brilliant middle distance horse, as we saw last year in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So I thought it was a tough beat, but I don't give him an excuse per se. It just was a tough beat. He ran great. He had the best race of his life, and he wasn't quite good enough.
26 flat, according to the GPS tracking at Del Mar over the last quarter for Fierceness, 51-53 over the last half mile. It just got to him. And only one horse was able to get to him, though, because the race is not just the split, it's start to finish. So as great as he ran the first half, he ran good enough in the second half to beat everybody but one, but it was Sierra Leone who got to him. As for my toughest beat, it goes to Johannes. I thought he ran a really good race. Johannes. I say it a different way every time I pronounce it, but either way you say it, absolutely game in the Breeders' Cup Mile. What I really liked about this performance, Jeff, is he looked the favorite in the eye. He had notable speech. Those two were closing at the same time, 3-4 pass off, and he looked right at notable speech and put him away. And then it took an amazing effort, last to first by More Than Looks, who just ran a tremendous race, flying home. And I don't think Johannes ever saw that horse coming, way out on the track, another rival next to him. And Johannes ran a tremendous race. Let's go back and take a look at the Breeders' Cup Mile and see. There's a point in here where you think, wow, notable speech is going to go by him. He digs in tough, and then just the last gasp is all about More Than Looks in the stretch. But Johannes, game race in defeat.
As they arrive at the top of the stretch, Goliad, 10 Happy Rose moves up alongside. Carl Spackler trying to come and get them. Johannes is closing with notable speech. More Than Looks trying to unwind from the back of the pack. Here is Johannes and notable speech. More Than Looks coming, 10 Happy Rose on the inside. A wild finish that goes to More Than Looks. More Than Looks gets up under Jose Ortiz to win the Breeders' Cup Mile.
He's galloping out next to him, looking over like, where'd you come from? That was my race to win. I think he thought he won it, outgaming notable speech in there. Really strong performance. One of the most eye-popping performances. We don't have that as a category, but More Than Looks was just phenomenal on the back end of this race. A good edition of this year's Breeders' Cup Mile. I don't think it was a world-class edition with the horses who came over, but from the American standpoint, for us to run 1-2 in there, these are two really good milers in the U.S.
If you could read a jockey's mind and if you could read a horse's mind, you could read both Johannes and Pratt's thinking there. Looking over and you think you want it, and you look over and here comes this horse flying by. It's mother. How did I lose this race?
Yeah.
You know, so really, to me, it was a terrific performance, and I figured he would run his race. I just thought notable speech for me personally was just the better of the two, and he had every chance, and he just got beat. And give the New York shipper some credit. He did run some tough luck over in New York, pace dependent, but he was absolutely last at the top of the stretch.
Yeah,
and he just whipped to the outside, and again over a course that was really kind towards speed. I thought that I'm sorry, kind to the closes. I beg your pardon. I thought he might have been helped a little bit by that, but he did it. Coming last quarter in sub 23. Good race. It was a very competitive race. It was an exciting race. There was never a spot in that race until the final 20 yards that you thought you knew who was going to win. I thought Johannes had struck the front in the proper spot, but and he did. I mean, he did. He won. He thinks he won the race. Where's my trophy? Type of thing.
Reese Bully did everything right, but they just didn't get the victory in that one. I called that one the toughest beat from a horse standpoint at the Breeders' Cup this year. This was my worst beat as a bettor. I was all in on Porta Fortuna, shuffled back at the start, and then just an abysmal ride from Tom Markhand. Stop me in the future if I ever bet one of these international jockeys again in the Breeders' Cup who are not one of the proven guys here in the U.S. Just a brutal ride, and then she didn't fire once there was any kind of space out there, just kind of waved the towel. But a terrible performance from Porta Fortuna and rider involved, and terrible handicapping on my part because I put all my eggs in that basket, and it didn't work out there. But
I want to say one thing real quick. There's another situation where you liked her to win. I liked her to be a major player and to hit the board at least. Another no-show, and I mean, it must have been a dozen no-shows, horses that I thought they could win. They don't have to win, but I'm pretty sure they're going to run. And then I'll look up and they're nowhere. It happened so often. That's what was the most disappointing thing about the Breeders' Cup this year for me is that you had horses who just didn't fire, and there was no logical explanation that they didn't.
Give me William Buick, give me Ryan Moore, give me Frankie Dettori, and anybody else, I'm burning tickets. So those are the international jockeys I'm going to rely on from heretofore. But that was certainly, for me, a tough beat at the window that had nothing to do with the finish, but a tough beat for Johannes at the finish of that one. Let's talk about our next category. Who was unlucky at the Breeders' Cup? Your most unlucky, Jeff. We'll send you back to the ballot box here. And who do you got? Rousham Park in the Breeders' Cup Turf. I'm going to talk about a little more general in my most unlucky performers of the Breeders' Cup. You tell me why Rousham Park was the most unluckiest runner.
Well, he was only unlucky because he was 13th with a quarter of a mile to go, and he got finished second, beaten the neck. And again, he had to come home his last. The leader came the last half mile in 47-2, and he must have had to come home in 45-2. And you shouldn't have to come home that fast in a mile and a half turf race to win, and he fell short. So he was unlucky from that standpoint. Again, perhaps maybe benefiting from the pro closers nature of the turf course. I looked at his form in Japan. I wanted to look for a price. I looked at him. I said, do I think he's good enough? He's good enough to maybe finish fourth or fifth, And he ran better than I did. And I not only was he, unlucky, but those who backed him, and I knew some people who did, got beat a neck, and that would have been their weekend. So it all comes together. But on the other hand, he could have salvaged a little bit for the Japanese entourage, and he couldn't quite do it. And that would have made their day. And it turns out, as you know, Japan's horses were basically a disaster.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit. Let's go back to the Breeders' Cup Turf, see how far back Rousham Park was early in the race.
Doubling up, John is second last. Rousham Park is the trailer. Cabo Spirit on top. Moving into the clubhouse turn. Breeders' Cup winner. Rebels Romance is a length and a half behind. Farbridge continues to be right in behind them, while covered up at the rail. There goes Harvard is next, moving on the outside. Then Wingspan, Luxembourg, Gold Phoenix, and Shargar tour the rail. Break of another 2 to JRB inside of Grand Sonata, then El Encinal. Doubling up, John is second last ahead of Rousham Park. 3/4 up in 1:13.82 seconds. Cabo Spirit is the leader up the backstretch. Rebels Romance 3/4 of a length behind. Then Farbridge third to the inside. There goes Harvard is fourth. Right in behind them, Wingspan, Gold Phoenix, Luxembourg now coming under a ride while riding the rail around the far turn. Rebels Romance moving now. Rebels Romance takes the lead from Cabo Spirit as they make their way to the top of the stretch. There goes Harvard is next. Farbridge trapped in behind horses, no place to go. Then Gold Phoenix and Wingspan, and on the far outside, Rousham Park from behind, but Rebels Romance has built a big lead here. Rousham Park is cutting into it. Rebels Romance by 2. Rousham Park coming. Rebels Romance, Rousham Park. Rebels Romance, a Breeders' Cup winner again. Rousham Park was second. Shariar was third.
22-4 the final quarter for Rousham Park, according to the GPS. 46-1 over the last half mile. That's unbelievable to lose on the back end of a mile and a half turf race.
Too.
And wide, yes.
Jeremy, though, I don't think he'll ever go down as a great horse, but Rebels Romance to me is a pro's pro. I mean, he's he won 5 out of 6 this year. He's a gelding. We'll enjoy him again as long as he continues his form. He always seems to continue his form. And I'm even though the horse I liked in that race, JRB was off the board and off the track. It was a soft spot in my heart for Rebels Romance to win again. Second Breeders' Cup win in 3 years because he's such a pro. These horses are athletes, and you always have to admire them when they bring their A game, and he always brings his A game. So a deserving winner.
Yeah, absolutely. Joins Conduit, 2-time winner of the Breeders' Cup Turf. Now, for me, the most unlucky performers of the Breeders' Cup were fans of the Breeders' Cup Distaff division, Jeff. Yes, we got to see Torpedo Anna, but we didn't get to see anybody else. Awesome result was Scratch. The vet scratched the undefeated Japanese horse. We lost Idiomatic after the pre-entries. This was the horse, obviously, Idiomatic, who last year had won the Distaff. The top horse in California, Adair Manor, was talked about for the Pacific Classic. Take on the boys, go to the Distaff as maybe the favorite. She was gone by end of summer. Just FYI, last year's champion 2-year-old filly never developed really at all this year at 3 after a second in the Kentucky Oaks. So we didn't get to see her develop. It was Torpedo Anna against the rest of them, if you will. And it turned out not to be all that exciting. It was just kind of a coronation for her. And we're going to go listen to the call here. And for a legendary horse who had the season she had, just listen to the dulcet tones of Larry Colmus call this one home. It lacks the excitement because simply it was not that exciting.
Ryan Hernandez Jr. and Torpedo Anna begin their run into the far turn. Raging Sea has been glued to her throughout, and with 3 furlongs to go, the lead is just a neck. Torpedo Anna from Raging Sea, Honor the Lady and Candy 2 lengths off of them. And then comes Elise Verite and Sugarfish. Torpedo Anna still cruising along here, and she's starting to get away from Raging Sea as they come to the top of the stretch in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and Torpedo Anna begins to move away. 1 furlong to go, she's in front by 2. Raging Sea still there, trying to fight for second, then Candide in third, but this brilliant filly's going to take them all the way. Torpedo Anna, what a year for her. She won it by 3 over Raging Sea.
It was quite a year, but you look at the fillies that she beat in this race, the ones she beat in the past. Without that Travers, where she outfinished Sierra Leone and just missed out the fierceness, there's not a lot of names in the past performances to get you excited about just how great maybe Torpedo Anna was. And you say, well, what do you expect? What are you asking for? Think about the great Personal Ensign in 1988 when she won the Breeders' Cup Distaff, a race we still think about, we still talk about. Again, 1988, it's 2024. That was 36 years ago because she beat Goodbye Halo and Winning Colors, the Oaks winners. Or Derby and Oaks winners on the finish line. She had the foils there to make the drama. There was no foil in here whatsoever for Torpedo Anna, so it just kind of became a procession. That's not a knock on her at all, but it's just a letdown in terms of what could have been a great distaff, where you're really looking forward to what could have been a legendary showdown. I mean, defending champ Idiomatic, Adair Manor had last year's champion, Just FYI, developed at 3. This could have been an all-timer. Like, if you'd have told me in May this could be an all-time distaff, it's a legitimate conversation piece. But this year, it just turned out to be a handover to her, and she took advantage of it and ran an excellent race. But I just wanted to see more. I just wanted more, being greedy.
I wanted to see Awesome Result in the race, and she got a late scratch. So, because I had watched video of her, and she was one that could have laid right up off the pace or even on it. She would have made Torpedo Anna run a little harder than she ever had to run. In fact, also kind of anticlimactic for me because given the pace scenario, and we saw this in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, when you go the first opening quarter and half at Del Mar, as easy as she was able to do, and it was never any doubt in my mind she was going to win at any stage. Right. And she went about her business. But I mean, I think if you evaluate that race and the trip that she had and the time and all that other stuff, she really didn't run that much better than she had run in the Cotillion, if you want to know the truth. I mean, based on, the time and the way she did it and who she was beating, which was, it wasn't a great group, let's face it, with all the absentees. So it was kind of hollow to me. I still, you still think that she's a major contender, if not the favorite. For Horse of the Year based on resume, and that's okay. I mean, she did everything except lose the Travers in a photo. I mean, that was great. That shouldn't have chipped away at that. But I just was left a little empty with that. And that's, you want to see memorable performances, and all she did what she had to do. It wasn't exactly memorable, for maybe through no fault of her own, but it just didn't turn out that way.
And the position on the card didn't help either, right? They moved up the 3 big races, the Distaff, the Turf, and the Classic, for NBC television because of their Big Ten football package, so that they weren't on Peacock or USA or another network. But that detracted a little bit. Even if this was a coronation, let's say this was the last race on the Breeders' Cup card, right? And everybody's kind of like waiting around to see Torpedo Anna put in a great performance, and we could just kind of cheer her around the track, that kind of deal like that. It would have had more to to it.
Yeah,
A little
you
more
know what it was, Jeremy? It was the 6th race in the card. That's what it was.
Yeah, right. And it was in the middle of the multi-race bets, and it kind of screwed them up a little bit in terms of how do you want to play this with such a heavy favorite? And so just none of it really worked. And I think that's what made fans of the Breeders' Cup Distaff the most unlucky of this year's Breeders' Cup. Okay, we talked about there being some flops on the track at the Breeders' Cup. Deciding which one was the biggest flop was not easy to do. So let's go back to the booth and tell us, Jeff, biggest flop of the Breeders' Cup. What say you?
How does Cogburn collapse like that? He broke like a rocket ship. He made the lead. He was clear. He was going fast, but he's a fast horse over a fast course. He turned the corner to the stretch, opened up. If you had stopped the video at the 3/16 pole and then with them told that he finished off the board, you'd say, yeah, right.
Right.
For a horse who had been so consistent and world record holder, I mean, you talk about a flop, especially since a lot of people needed him in the in the rolling exotics. I mean, they figured, okay, maybe he doesn't have to win, but how deep do I have to go?
Right.
If I think he's going to lose, I mean, who's going to beat him and how deep? I'll just single him and hope to survive in advance, and then he just collapses. I mean, to me, that was the biggest flop, and I don't know whether what it means, but he could have finished out the year in a glorious fashion with the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. He had it in his hands. He just dropped the ball. Simple as that. Wow.
He could have been on the Horse of the Year ballot if he could have got the final 16th of a mile. Let's go back and watch an improbable finish in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint.
Followed by AG Bullet. Iran Ortiz and Cogburn have a 4-length lead at the top of the stretch here in the Turf Sprint. They come bounding by the 8-pole clear. Izzy Bungu Bungu tries to gain ground. Then AG Bullet. Starlust is rallying up the rail, and they're getting to Cogburn now. Here comes AG Bullet. Here comes Starlust. Starlust comes from the clouds to win. AG.
And Starlust, my long shot. Yeah, I mean, I had 9-4 all in the Super. I was at the 16th pole, I was just like, is the 4 going to get second? And by the finish line, I'm like, where the hell did Cogburn end up here? What happened to this spot? I mean, in a 5-furlong turf sprint, like you're saying at the 3/16th pole, a horse in Cogburn's position in a maiden race is 1-5 to win that. To be of Cogburn's quality and then not hit the board, just an unbelievable stop. And, I mean, he'd run without Lasix in the past, things like that. I mean, it's not something that you would have foreseen happening. It's horse racing. They line up and they run them, and sometimes even when they run them from the 3/16th pole home, you can't figure it out. That's one you don't get right in the replay.
No, I mean, I've had horses that have done that, so I can relate. But the race is over, and you say, "What happened? How did I lose this one?" This horse is in front. I mean, if you stop the tape, he's probably in front 70, 80 yards before the wire. He finished 5th. I mean, and this is a horse who has a history of leading the weight in the stretch and then opening up. It wasn't like he's a fast horse who kind of hangs on for dear life. So to me, that is by far the biggest flop, and that's the biggest flop I've seen in years. Especially the way sometimes the horse runs badly. You expect him to win because he has trouble. This horse popped the gate, opened up, fall 4 lengths inside forget it. I've seen it all.
As they like to say in Oklahoma quarter horse racing, he jerked a knot into Bradsell. I mean, Bradsell tried to run with him. He jerked a knot in him, sent him backwards, and then just won the battle, lost the war, I guess, the way it ends up. Let's go to my biggest flop of the Breeders' Cup. I'm going to the entire island of Japan. The results from the Japanese were a little less than what we would expect. Look, I know Japan won 2 races at the 2021 Breeders' Cup at Del Mar. March Lorraine pulled the big upset. Loves Only You was a horse who was 4-1 and expected to run a little bit better when she won. So Was it just that we're back to Del Mar? The Japanese have run so well in the Dubai program and in those big international races. Did we overinflate the Japanese going into this year's Breeders' Cup, Jeff? I'll let you talk on that a little bit as we look at the results of the runners at the 2024 Breeders' Cup. 19 of them came over here. We did have the one scratch of Awesome Result. 18-0-1-2, no wins, 1 second, 2 third-place finishes. The second and third both came in the Breeders' Cup turf. So outside of the Breeders' Cup turf, these Japanese runners did absolutely nothing. 11 of them finishing 8th or worse, Jeff.
See, if you didn't put the title up there, I thought you might have mistakenly put up Aaron Judge's batting. But that wasn't it. But it reminds me of that where I didn't know enough about the Japanese runners, and I usually don't because I just don't have a clear handle on the form over there. You watch the video, you think you know who's good and who can run and who doesn't, but never did I expect it to be this bad. And it was just awful. It didn't start out good. It never got any better. So, other than that, the colt that I mentioned,
Rawson Park.
Park in the turf, and he wasn't even supposed to run that well. I mean, I looked at his form and I'm saying that's a Group 2 horse, maybe. I mean, I don't know if he's that good. He's 5 years old. He's not like he's some up and coming prospect. Do we utilize this information maybe next year at Del Mar? Do we think of a couple of years back as being a fluke and maybe downgrade the Japanese horses the next time they come over here? Because they'll come next year. They like traveling and the money's good and it's not that hard a ship. I mean, I guess you learn from experience, and I think we learned something. What do you think, Jeremy?
They're 2 for 47 in the Breeders' Cup now. They did get to 2 in 2021, but there are 45 others who give you a decent body and sample size to look at now. And they're coming right back to Del Mar, as you just mentioned. Breeders' Cup 2025 will be back at Del Mar. So you expect that 19-runner contingent that they brought over, maybe similar. Maybe they'll be a little bit more reluctant to bring over 6 different juveniles to run on the 2-year-old card since they didn't perform very well. But they might be emboldened to try harder and bring more and see what they can do in the 2-year-old ranks to improve. Obviously, the bloodstock over there, their international prowess has been on the rise. I mean, there's no question about that. The success they've had on the Dubai Carnival cards, unmistakable. You've got to comment to that. The Saudi Crown cards, the Saudi Cup cards, you've got to talk about those as well. So we're giving them a hard time because they ran so poorly this particular weekend. But overall, you still feel like the Japanese runners are obviously on the upward trajectory. But do we need to bet them all at shorter prices and kind of go after them and, make 1 out of 3 horses that they bring over here single-digit odds? Probably not. I think get a little bit better prices on them next year. And I always say there's nothing wrong with trying. Look, I gambled on Next, who never picked up a hoof. But if you're going to give me 13-1 on a horse who's won everything by 10, 20 lengths all year, it's not a bad gamble. Taking a short price on that kind of thing, like maybe City of Troy or one of these other question marks, a short price to do something that you're not quite sure they can do, that's never a great gamble. But if you're going to get a big enough price, you stay with them. So the future looking ahead for betting Japanese horses in the Breeders' Cup, if you're going to get a fair price and a big price, they're worth a shot. But when you take short odds on them moving forward, I don't know. I don't think that's a good move moving forward.
It was evolving, and a lot of those Saudi horses who ran earlier in the year didn't follow through at all. Horse that won the sprint over there, I think, finished dead last in the sprint here. So
look, and that was another thing too. Like, right, a lot of those ran like Dubai or Saudi, took long layoffs, had one tune-up, and entered the Breeders' Cup here. Maybe they will rethink their prep path and say that wasn't enough, right? And maybe you'll see a little bit different kind of conditioned program for these horses coming over to the Breeders' Cup next year. Something to keep an eye on. I think they're going to, like any trainer or any kind of, horseman, you're going to assess what works and what doesn't work for them. And this obviously didn't work this year. And maybe they'll change up the game a little bit next year, and they're worth keeping an eye on. But for me, you're going to have to show me again. You're going to have to come back to, and again, March Lorraine was a massive price. So there's been one logical